Society has for a century received so many blows, and had to hear its superhuman essence reviled as an inhuman one so often, that one cannot feel tempted to draw the sword against it again, and yet it has almost always been only moral opponents that have appeared in the arena, to assail the supreme essence in favor of another supreme essence. So Proudhon, unabashed, says, "Man is destined to live without religion, but the moral law is eternal and absolute. Who would dare today to attack morality? Moral people skimmed off the best fat from religion, ate it themselves, and are now having a tough job to get rid of the resulting scrofula. If, therefore, we point out that religion has not by any means been hurt in its inmost parts so long as people reproach it only with its superhuman essence, and that it takes its final appeal to the spirit alone, for God is spirit, then we have sufficiently indicated its final accord with morality, can leave its stubborn conflict with the latter lying behind us. It is a question of a supreme essence with both, and whether this is a superhuman or a human one can make, since it is in any case in essence over me a supermind one, so to speak, but little difference to me. In the end, the relation to the human essence, or to man, as soon as ever it has shed the snakeskin of the old religion, will yet wear a religious snakeskin again. So Feuerbach instructs us that if one only inverts speculative philosophy, i.e. always makes the predicate the subject, and so makes the subject the object and principle, one has the undraped truth, pure and clean. Herewith, to be sure, we lose the narrow religious standpoint, lost the God, who from this standpoint is subject, but we take in exchange for it the other side of the religious standpoint, the moral standpoint. Thus we no longer say God is love, but love is divine. If we further put in place of the predicate divine the equivalent sacred, then as far as concerns the sense, all the old comes back again. According to this, love is to be the good in man, his divineness, that which does him honor, his true humanity, and makes him man for the first time, makes for the first time a man out of him. So then it would be more accurately worded thus: love is what is human in man, and what is inhuman is the loveless egoist. But precisely all that which Christianity, and with its speculative philosophy, i.e. theology, offers as the good, the absolute, is to self-ownership simply not the good, or what means the same is only the good. Consequently, by the transformation of the predicate into the subject, the Christian essence, and it is the predicate that contains the essence, would only be fixed yet more oppressively. God and the divine would entwine themselves all the more inextricably with me. To expel God from this heaven and rob him of his transcendence cannot yet support a claim of complete victory, if therein he is only chased into the human breast and gifted with indelible immanence. Now, they say, the divine is the truly human. The same people who oppose Christianity as the basis of the state, i.e. oppose the so-called Christian state, do not tire of repeating that morality is the fundamental pillar of social life and of the state, as if the dominion of morality were not a complete dominion of the sacred, a hierarchy. So we may here mention, by the way, that rationalist movement which, after theologians had long insisted that only faith was capable of grasping religious truths that only to believers did God reveal himself, and that therefore only the heart, the feelings, the believing fancy was religious, broke out with the assertion that the natural understanding, human reason, was also capable of discerning God. What does that mean but that the reason laid claim to be the same visionary as the fancy? In this sense, Reimarus wrote his most notable truths of natural religion. It had to come to this, that the whole man with all his faculties was found to be religious, heart and affections, understanding and reason, feeling, knowledge and will, in short, everything in man appeared religious. Hegel was shown that even philosophy is religious, and what is not called religion today? The religion of love, the religion of freedom, political religion, in short, every enthusiasm. So it is, too, in fact. To this day we use the Romance word religion, which expresses the concept of a condition of being bound. To be sure, we remain bound so far as religion takes possession of our inward parts, but is the mind also bound? On the contrary, that is free, is sole Lord, is not our mind, but absolute. Therefore, the correct affirmative translation of the word religion would be freedom of mind. In whomsoever the mind is free, he is religious, in just the same way as he in whom the senses have free course is called a sensual man. Mind binds the former, the desires the latter. Religion, therefore, is boundness, or religion with reference to me. I am bound. It is freedom with reference to the mind. The mind is free, or has freedom of mind. Many know from experience how hard it is on us when the desires run away with us, free and unbridled, but that the free mind, splendid intellectuality, enthusiasm for intellectual interests, or however this jewel may be in the most various phrase be named, brings us into yet more grievous straits that even the wildest impropriety people will not perceive, nor they perceive it without being consciously egoists. Reimarus, and all who have shown that our reason, our heart, etc., also lead to God, has therewithal shown that we are possessed through and through. To be sure, they vexed the theologians from whom they took away the prerogative of religious exaltation, but for religion, for freedom of mind, they thereby conquered yet more ground. For, when the mind is no longer limited to feeling or faith, but also in understanding, reason, and thought in general, belongs to itself the mind, when therefore it may take part in the spiritual and heavenly truths in the form of understanding, as well as in its other forms, then the whole mind is occupied only with spiritual things, i.e., with itself, and is therefore free. How we are so through and through religious that jurors, i.e., sworn men, condemn us to death, and every policeman, as a good Christian, takes us to the lockup by virtue of an oath of office. Morality could not come into opposition with piety till after the time when in general the boisterous hate of everything that looked like an order, decrees, commandments, etc., spoke out in revolt, and the personal absolute Lord was scoffed at and persecuted. Consequently, it could arrive at independence only through liberalism, whose first form acquired significance in the world's history as citizenship, and weakened the specifically religious powers. For when morality not merely goes along a side of piety, but stands on feet of its own, then its principle lies no longer in the divine commandments, but in the law of reason, from which the commandments, so far as they are still to remain valid, must first await justification for their validity. In the law of reason, man determines himself out of himself, for man is rational, and out of the essence of man, those laws fall out of necessity. Piety and morality part company in this, that the former makes God the lawgiver, the latter man. From a certain standpoint of morality, people reason about as follows. Either man is led by a sensuality, and is, following it, immoral, or he is led by the good, which taken up into the will is called moral sentiment and preposition in favor of the good. Then he shows himself moral. From this point of view, however, e.g., can Sand's act against Kotzebue be called immoral? What is commonly understood by unselfish, it certainly was, in the same measure as, among other things, St. Crispin's thieveries in favor of the poor. He should not have murdered, for it stands written, Thou shalt not murder. Then to serve the good, the welfare of the people, as Sand at least intended, or the welfare of the poor, like Crispin, is moral. But murder and theft are immoral, the purpose moral, the means immoral. Why? Because murder, assassination, is something absolutely bad. When the guerrillas enticed the enemies of the country into ravines and shot them down unseen from the bushes, do you suppose that was assassination? According to the principle of morality, which commands us to serve the good, you could really ask only whether murder could never in any case be a realization of the good, and would have to endorse that murder which realized the good. You cannot condemn Sand's deed at all. It was moral because in the service of the good, because unselfish. It was an act of punishment which the individual inflicted, and execution inflicted at the risk of the executioner's life. What else had this scheme been, after all, but that he wanted to suppress writings by brute force? Are you not acquainted with the same procedure as a legal and sanctioned one, and what can be objected against it from your principle of morality? But it was an illegal execution, so the immoral thing in it was the illegality, the disobedience to law. Then you admit that the good thing is nothing else than law, morality nothing else than loyalty, and to this externality of loyalty your morality must sink to this righteousness of works in the fulfillment of the law, only that the latter is at once more tyrannical and more revolting than the old-time righteousness of works. For in the latter only the act is needed, but you require the disposition too. One must carry in himself the law, the statute, and he who is most legally dispossessed is the most moral. Even in the last vestige of cheerfulness in Catholic life must perish in this Protestant legality. Here at last the domination of the law is for the first time complete. Not I live, but the law lives in me. Thus I have really come so far to be the only vessel of its glory. Every Prussian carries his gendarme in his breast, says a high Prussian officer. Why do certain opposition parties fail to flourish? Solely for the reason that they refuse to forsake the path of morality or legality. Hence the measurelessness, hypocrisy of devotion, love, etc., from whose repulsiveness one may daily get the most tough nausea at this rotten and hypocritical retaliation of a lawful opposition. In the moral relation of love and fidelity of a divided or opposed one cannot have place. The beautiful relation is disturbed if the one wills this and the other the reverse. But now, according to the practice hitherto and the old prejudice of the opposition, the moral relation is to be preserved above all. What is then left to the opposition? Perhaps the will to have a liberty, if the beloved one sees fit to deny it. Not a bit! It may not will to have the freedom, it can only wish for it, petition for it. It's a please, please, what could come of it? The opposition really willed with the full energy of the will. No, it must renounce will in order to live to love, renounce liberty for love of morality. It may never claim as a right what is permitted only to beg as favor. Love, devotion, etc. demand with undeviating diffidentness that there be only one will to which the morality when one follows it, and immorality when one breaks away from it. The will that commands the censorship seems to make unreasonable, but he who in a land of censorship obeys the censoring of his book acts immorally, and he who submits it to the censorship acts morally. If one let his moral judgment go and set up, e.g. a secret press, one would have to call him immoral and imprudent in the bargain if he let himself be caught. But will such a man lay claim to a value in the eyes of the moral? Perhaps. That is, if he fancied he was serving a higher morality. The web of the hypocrisy of today hangs on the frontiers of two domains, between which our time swings back and forth, attaching its fine threads of deception and self-deception. No longer vigorous enough to serve morality without doubt or weakening, or not yet reckless enough to live wholly to egoism, it trembles now toward the one and now toward the other in the spiderweb of hypocrisy, and, crippled by the curse of halfness, catches only resignation. If, on the other side, they have had the face to reject the free motion with moral appeals to confidence, immediately the moral courage also sinks, and they assured one how they hear the free words with special pleasures, etc. They sham approval. In short, people would like to have the one, but not go without the other. They would like to have a free will, but not for their lives lack the moral will. Just come in contact with a servile loyalist, you liberals. You will sweeten every word of freedom with a look of the most loyal confidence, and he will clothe in his servilism in the most flattering phrases of freedom. Then you go apart, and he, like you, thinks, I know you, fox! He scents the devil in you as much as you go to the dark old Lord, God in him. A Nero in a bad man, only in the eyes of the good. In man, he is nothing but a possessed man, as are the good too. The good see him in an arch-villain and relegate him to hell, Why did nothing harder hinder in him his arbitrary course? Why did people put up with him so much? Do you suppose the tame Romans, who let all their will be bound by such a tyrant, were a hair the better? In old Rome they would have been put to death instantly, would never have been his slaves. The contemporary good among the Romans opposed to him only moral demands, not their will. They sighed that their emperor did not do homage to morality. Like them, they themselves remained moral subjects till at least one found courage to give up moral obedient subjection. And then the same good Romans, who as obedient subjects had borne to all the ignominy of having no will, hurrahed over the nefarious immoral acts of the rebel. Where, then, is the good was the courage for the revolution, that courage which they now praised after another had mustered it up? The good could not have this courage, for a revolution and an insurrection into this bargain is always something immoral, which only can resolve upon only when one ceases to be good, and becomes either bad or neither of the two. Nero was no viler than his time, in which one could only be one of the two, good or bad. The judgment of his time had to be that he was bad, and this is the highest degree. Not a milksop, but an arch scoundrel. All moral people can pronounce only this judgment on him. Rascals, e.g. are still living here and there today, in the midst of the moral. It is not convenient to live among them, certainly, as one is not sure of his life for a moment, but can you say that it is more convenient to live among the moral? One is just as little sure of his life there, only that one is hanged in the way of justice. Least of all is one sure of his honor, and the national cockade is gone before you can say Jack Robinson. The hard fist of morality treats the noble nature of egoism altogether without compassion.